Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have two amazing guests to reintroduce to you now. Dr. Laura Buchanan and Dr. Matt Calkins are returning guests on our show. Be sure to check out Laura's first appearance on episode 521, and both Laura and Matt on episode 566 of Boundless Body Radio. Dr. Laura Buchanan is a board-certified family medicine physician with a passion for using lifestyle modification as the frontline standard of care wherever possible. Since entering the field of medicine, Laura has been interested in the intersections of longevity, metabolic health, lifestyle changes, and chronic disease. Dr. Matt Calkins is board certified in family medicine and loves studying the science of longevity, the optimization of all phases of health, and applying his knowledge to physician and patient wellness. Matt earned his MD from the University of Florida and holds a bachelor's in physics. He has published papers on metabolic health, food addiction, continuous glucose monitors, and diabetes. When they're not active in the clinic, Laura and Matt's favorite things to do are going hiking and playing tennis, trying out new low carbohydrate recipes, and celebrating wins, both big and small, with their patients. Their idea of a perfect date is to print out medical studies and debate them with each other over a massive ribeye and a huge pile of broccoli. We are also joined by James, who is surely a doctor in the making, their lovely child. It is a joy to welcome all three of you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Glad to be back.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us.
I loved chatting with you guys before. I was so excited to get an update on James. He looks incredibly healthy and happy. I know he was doing great last time we talked. Let's get an update. How's he doing?
Yeah, he is doing great. His core has got to be the strongest core I've ever seen. He'll balance from the table to the couch, doing a full plank Superman style. He's got no fear, which is a little bit scary. He likes to jump off of things, and he's only 20 months old, so jumping off of things is, again, a little scary. But he loves being active. His favorite thing is to be outside, so happy with everything.
Probably in the 99th percentile for egg intake, so he's getting a lot of choline too.
Are you not too worried about cholesterol intake for the young one?
Not just yet. We'll get a calcium score if that ever becomes.
There you go. Yeah, good idea. Good idea. We'll get him on a statin soon. Yeah, that's fantastic. You guys told me before how strong he was. I think the last time we talked, he was 6 months old. So it's good to know that he's, still very strong and very happy. Has his diet been, kind of the same? Like, have you guys kind of stuck with a lower-ish kind of whole foods carbohydrate, the low carbohydrate diet?
It's totally whole food. He will have, some fruits. Probably is definitely his highest source of carbs, I'd say, but we make sure every day he's getting some source of, either ground beef, salmon, steak, eggs.
Liver and sardines.
Yeah.
So omega-3s and all the good stuff from liver.
Yeah. Did you guys grow up eating organ meats and or sardines or anything like that?
Absolutely not.
No. not much.
Wish I did, knowing what we know now.
Totally. Like, yeah, now that I'm trying to get into some of those things and eat them, I don't have the taste for them. I think they taste disgusting. It would have been nice to get those as a kiddo and build up that taste for it. And that's awesome that he's on that diet and just absolutely thriving. Obviously a little bit young, not tons of like friends he's hanging out with. But it hasn't been a challenge at all to continue to feed him that way. When supposedly if he isn't hanging out with other kids or social events, they're eating probably not the same thing.
He's actually a pretty particular eater. And so, particular in some ways, not in others. So he doesn't even have interest in eating like chips, or if someone were to offer them, or bread, crackers, he won't touch them.
Wow.
So he'll like play with them, but he won't put them in his mouth. So same thing. I think once at a kid's party, they offered him a slice of cake, and I was like, sure, because he won't eat it. And
wow.
He refused. So we're
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Has he taken to anything kind of sweet? Like, has he tried anything like a popsicle or something?
He hasn't had that, but he loves strawberries.
Cool.
Wow. So yeah, he gets strawberries pretty much on a daily basis. He really likes that. And I'm trying to think other like starchy vegetables. Not a ton, but sometimes he'll have some, some green peas, sweet potato.
Yeah, gotcha. I mentioned Yeah, so healthy. It looks amazing. I've made this point several times on the show, more for the parents who have transitioned their kids over to something like a low carbohydrate diet, whether it was a type 1 diabetes diagnosis or type 2 diabetes diagnosis, like a reason to go kind of that lower carb. And I've made this point before, and I'm going to stand by it. I don't think the kids hate it. I think they do okay with it. And I think after a transition period, they tend to prefer it. Like, why
Yeah.
would you not want to have amazing energy and not be hungry, and that you can just like go out and play the way you're supposed to?
Yeah, it was really cool at the low carb or the Symposium of Metabolic Health. Now it's the new name, conference in Boca Raton this year. I was talking to one of the other people there, and her kid, who does incredible parkour. I mean, his core and his strength and skills are amazing. And he's been low carb for a while, and he was actually going to do a little bit of carnivore just for a bit, and he loves it because he's in incredible shape and he feels amazing. And
Wow.
seeing the videos, he's just thriving on low carb, and he's
That's
12.
amazing.
I think he was 12 or 13. So
Wow, that's amazing. Well,
yeah.
okay. Speaking of, I wanted another update as well. I left in the introduction that you guys, we'll discuss studies over the ribeye and the broccoli. The carnivore in me wants to know if the broccoli is still there or if that's diminished at all.
So for me, it's definitely cycling. If you had asked me in January, I was totally carnivore for maybe 2 months or so. And then I just recently started incorporating a little bit more vegetables again. And then, yeah, I'll let Matt speak for himself. But
I still like my non-starchy vegetables, but it's awesome. So I have my own basically traditional type clinic in a clinic system here in North Carolina. Laura is doing the telehealth medicine thing, but I'm seeing patients in person. The number one thing that I see when patients come in to see me for my metabolic health clinic, if they've already started, invariably they're a carnivore, pretty much already putting their type 2 diabetes in remission. They almost always find it from people in the community already. Like Ken Berry is the most popular one. Just finding this some Tennessee physician and that does carnivore, and they basically heal themselves before they even see me. And I'm basically there to say, yeah, it's healthy. Like putting diabetes in remission, like that is the ultimate goal in medicine. And the patients that find it and do carnivore do amazingly well. But I do like the non-starchy vegetables.
Cool. No, I appreciate that. It's always interesting to see how those patterns kind of unfold for people. And yeah, somebody like Dr. Berry has done so much good putting his message out on social media and connecting with so many people, especially in your part of the country, is just absolutely wonderful. So yeah, love that update. That's fantastic. You guys have been busy. You've had a huge year, all kinds of amazing stuff, including the most recent results of the Towards study that you guys have put out, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And we're going to park that for a minute while we talk about some of the other things. We'll tease it. And I do want to talk about some of the things that you guys have been busy with, including the what was it, the consensus statement on type 1 diabetes that you guys released at the Boca Symposium last year, and also you submitted some commentary, which I thought was fascinating, to the American Pediatrics Association or something along those lines. Yeah, I'd love to hear. Why don't we start out with the type 1 diabetes like consensus statement, and what drove that, and how has that been received a year later?
yeah, so currently in standard of care practice, some of the major medical organizations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, recommends that children with type 1 diabetes consume 45 to 65% of their calories from carbohydrates. And so an example handout, this was coming from one of the major hospital systems that I pulled up from my talk this year. And this, again, it was just this year, this is their go-to nutritional recommendations, has an 8-year-old with, again, newly diagnosed type 1, recommended to eat 240 grams of carbohydrates per day, with eating 5 times that day.
Oh my goodness, that's insanity.
Yeah, 240 grams. And you talk about a blood sugar roller coaster and trying to dose insulin appropriately when you're consuming that amount of carbohydrates. And it is extremely difficult. Even if someone is really good at doing the math and the calculations for what the insulin appropriate dose should be, because of ways in the body that insulin is absorbed, and also the variation that is allowed on packaged food, so up to 20% off on the amount of carbohydrates that it says on the package, you can see if it's 20% off your insulin dosing. If you're consuming, 100 grams of carbohydrates at a single meal, can be way off, causing both or either really high blood sugars or really low, dangerous blood sugars. And so it just sets these kids up for these roller coasters of not only blood sugars, but their mood being put on a roller coaster with the swings. And then, of course, really sadly, the complications that they're more likely to have later in life.
That's crazy. Wow. We've covered that topic a lot, especially last year. We interviewed a lot of parents who are dealing with that diagnosis, including R.D. Dykman. And you're mentioning like these people who are, pretty smart. Like R.D. Dykman is kind of sort of smart. And so is his wife, who's also a doctor. And they're really good at math and physics and medical science. And they thought they could figure out exactly what to dose for their kid. And it's just this crazy target that you can never hit. And you're not told that, you could just do what their kids suggested from the beginning. It's like, well, maybe I just won't eat the carbohydrates. Is that okay? And they're told like, no, you have to eat the carbohydrates. It's nuts. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. And so the position statement that we wrote on regarding type 1 diabetes, first kind of reviewing the current outcomes, average A1C typically above 8%, depending on which study and population you're looking at. So that's an average blood sugar above 180. And it's much more associated with, again, the complications. Unfortunately, after 15 years of being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, there's over a close to 70% chance of having nerve damage, 25% chance of eye damage, and 5% chance of kidney damage. So if you're diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 10, you're talking at the age of 25, you're already having all of these complications with the current standard of care and the current outcomes. And so knowing, and talk about, again, children diagnosed before the age of 10, they have, depending on male or female, a 14 to 18 years shorter life expectancy. And so given those outcomes, we have to find a better way to do it. And low carb actually has, we need more research, but it actually has some really promising data behind it already. And this is what we need. The major endocrinology associations, the American Diabetes Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, to acknowledge and realize and start changing their recommendations.
Wow.
And we could go, I guess, to either two ways. One, talking about some of the really impressive results with low carb and type 1, or we could talk about first the AAP, basically how it doesn't recommend actively recommends against low carb for kids.
Yeah, let's discuss all of that. I just have to say, like, when Tro was first coming out about this stuff and was calling the American Diabetes Association, the American Heart Association, like terrorist groups, I was like, dude, okay, that's a strong statement. Like, I don't know if I'd go that far. Like, come on. He's absolutely right. They know about this stuff and they're actively hiding it. It is awful.
It is very sad. And you read on the American Diabetes Association website, they say that diabetes is chronic and progressive. And for type 1, you could say it's chronic. It doesn't, still, I don't think it has to be progressive. But for type 2, it absolutely does not have to be chronic and progressive. It's because on their website, the example, all their food recipes are filled with carbohydrates. They're low in protein. And so it's like, well, if you're telling someone who's got diabetes to eat a ton of carbohydrates, you are going to cause progression of that disease. And so it's, I think, in part driven by pharmaceuticals who, really profit from getting people on more medications.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So let's cover those 2 points that you brought up. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. So there's actually a really cool abstract. I want to say it was, I'm going to draw a blank on his name. Andrew Kutnick, I believe. Yeah. So they had an abstract that reviewed over 90 studies looking at over 45,000 individuals and looked at, based on carbohydrate intake, how many people met the ADA's, American Diabetes Association, A1C goal of less than 7%. If people were consuming a high carbohydrate diet, more than 45% of calories from carbohydrate, which, remember, that was actually the AAP, it's the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations, only 10% achieved the ADA's goal of A1C less than 7%. You move that to a moderate carbohydrate diet, 25 to 45%. You hit around 25% of people, and you go to low carb. It's a little bit higher. Yeah, it's closer to, I'm gonna draw a blank on that one, around 50%, don't quote that one. But on the very low carbohydrate diet, so less than 30 grams or definitely less than 50 grams per day, 100% of people following that diet met the ADA's goal. Not only did 100% meet the goal of A1C less than 7%, 70% had a normal A1C. I mean, talk about, you go from a 70% with a normal A1C, 100% meeting the goal, to only 10% meeting the goal with the current recommendations from some of the major medical societies. That's insanity.
It's incredible. Yeah, Andrew is doing such amazing work. He's such a stud.
Yeah.
Like what a cool finding. And yeah, it wouldn't surprise any of us who have been at this for a little while that they could accomplish that. But even seeing that number 100% is so striking.
Yeah, it is, and it's also so exciting. So if we can start getting more providers aware of this data, and hopefully then they'll start buying into the reality that low carb can be so helpful and effective and a healthy way to live, then we are going to be helping so many more people in the future.
Yeah. Laura, that's optimistic. That's optimistic.
I'm hopeful. We're working on, through the SMHP, the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, working on, getting the information spread. We've got a couple of talks into major dietetic societies already. We're trying to work now on getting into the American Nurses Association, and they're very excited actually about a potential partnership with this. So we're seeing, progress, and people are interested.
Good. That is great to hear. I just keep thinking, like, at some point there has to be a groundswell where they just cannot ignore some of these things anymore. And there's going to be days like today was a great example. I open up my phone and one of the first things I see is, latest study says that if you switch out butter for seed oils, you can have a 15% better chance outcome. And you're like, come on, like, it takes 30 seconds to scroll around and see the data. Like, this is terrible. Like, but that's that's what's getting the headline on CNN. It's not that 100% of type 1 diabetics are hitting their targets by going low carb. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I just hope there's like a critical mass at some point that you just can't ignore anymore.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, those studies, it is infuriating, and they keep coming out every week. There's another one from the
so dumb.
Harvard Public School of Health, or some other.
So dumb. The one in January was really good too. It came out also CNN headline with a picture of all the steaks, and it was like red meat will increase your risk of dementia by nearly 20%, which it wasn't even close, and the data was terrible. But what they considered red meat in this study was bacon, bologna, and hot dogs.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Nice. Yeah, with a picture of beautiful steaks as the cover photo.
Yeah.
So stunning. Okay, so let's talk about the AAP, I believe. The American Association of Pediatrics, is that right?
Close. Academy of Pediatrics.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so this is the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2023. I think it was actually Westman sent a message out to the board members of the SMHP about a clinical report that they had just published then in 2023 for the use of low carb diets in children with or at risk of diabetes. And that's a pretty important point that in the title in and of itself. So this clinical report looked at low carb ketogenic diets for kids with type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes and at risk for type 2 diabetes, which would be kids with obesity or really any other metabolic disease. And right then and there, it's kind of setting itself up for failure, because you cannot have two more physiologically distinct diseases than type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes, where it's an autoimmune disease in kids who are otherwise insulin sensitive, and for type 1 diabetes, and type 2 diabetes, which is ultimately fairly rare below the age of 18, but the prevalence has increased over 100% over the past decade for type 2 diabetes. It's an insulin resistance and additionally obesity, but they tried to lump these in together to give one blanket statement for ketogenic diets. So we looked at this as the board and we said, well, this is obviously not correct. There are some factual errors, inaccuracies, and some fallacies that they did. And we thought it was a good idea to try to make a letter to the editor. And what you have to do to write to the letter to the editor in the journal Pediatrics, which is the official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, is you just post a comment underneath their papers. And if it is selected, then it will get turned into an editorial. So we made two sets of comments because there was like a 100-word limit or something like that was super short. So we made two sets of comments, and neither of them were selected to be editorials, even though I think we raised very valid, excellent points, pointing out some of the inaccuracies. So then the next step was, because we were largely ignored, we wanted to create our own rebuttal to their clinical report so we can publish it. And then that can be cited in the future when these inaccuracies are brought up again and again and again. All you need to do is say, read this paper. And it's essentially like maybe a 5-page paper. And so what we did is we just read through the entirety of their clinical report, and then we read through the entirety of their citations. And the end result of this clinical report, they said, is that they ultimately would say you can do a ketogenic diet to treat type 1, type 2 diabetes or obesity in kids, but you have to follow these clinical guidelines. And the reason you got to follow these clinical guidelines, and we'll get to those in a second, is because of concerns of nutritional deficiency on a ketogenic diet, a whole food, well-formulated ketogenic diet, and concerns about disordered eating or eating disorders. So those are two separate issues that we can talk about real quick, but that's really the crux. They are concerned that kids are going to be nutritionally deficient, have poor growth, and you're going to cause eating disorders like anorexia nervosa or bulimia nervosa. So if you go through this paper, what they end up doing is, if you look through the pediatric literature in general for ketogenic diets have been used in pediatrics since about the early 20th century, maybe around 1910, for pediatric epilepsy. That's where we first started using it. And certainly it can be life-saving in pediatric epilepsy, especially back then when there were only about 2 to 3 anti-epileptic drugs. The problem arises where the entirety of the pediatric literature, more or less, except for one citation in their report, deals with 4-to-1 ketogenic diets used to treat pediatric epilepsy, and none of them used a modified Atkins diet under trained clinical supervision to treat these diseases. So what is the difference between that? A 4-to-1 ketogenic diet is a diet that has 4 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein and carbohydrate, which is about a 90% fat diet eating pattern. And this is important because it actually raises your ketosis levels to an adequate level to go above a seizure threshold so these kids don't get seizures. Again, life-saving, but that is a fairly much more restrictive diet. You can actually Google, if you're listening to this and you're not driving a car, you can Google Charlie Foundation. They have a picture of a plate with a 4-to-1 ketogenic diet and a picture of a plate with a well-formulated or modified Atkins ketogenic diet. And the difference is striking. You're allowed a lot more protein on the well-formulated ketogenic diet. And nobody is advocating for a 4-to-1 ketogenic diet to treat these diseases of type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes and obesity in kids. So right off the bat, this is a logical fallacy. They're creating this false equivalence between these two dietary patterns, that one is used to treat, again, a severe pediatric disease, epilepsy, and the other ones are used to treat metabolic diseases, type 1, type 2, and obesity. And so if you look at their main clinical report, there are, if I remember correctly, 33 citations and 32 citations. There's 18 citations, and I believe 17 citations were on the 4-to-1 ketogenic diet for epilepsy, generally published around the 1970s to 1980s. Nothing really more current than that. And there are concerns when you do a 4-to-1 ketogenic diet, and rightfully so. If you go through these papers, a 4-to-1 ketogenic diet, there are concerns about carnitine deficiency, which is an amino acid found in where else but red meat, that is very important for shuttling fatty acids into the mitochondria. And in these children that went on this 4-to-1 ketogenic diet, it did drop by about 10 units, and then it would come back up by the end of the year. And there are also concerns about calcium and platelet function. And essentially, they listed these concerns and they said, look, you need to trend 14 different labs over the first 5 times over the first year. So that's 5 different lab draws for 14 different lab measurements over the first year when you start a ketogenic diet. They did not, by the way, make a difference between the 4-to-1 ketogenic diet and the well-formulated. They did not even really define what they mean by a ketogenic diet. And they didn't actually even express that they were looking at 4-to-1 ketogenic diets at all.
Real quick, if
Yeah.
I may, just as a comparison, if a child or teenager has a bariatric surgery, so has part of their stomach removed or rerouted, then they need less blood work than is recommended for a ketogenic diet per the guidelines.
They need,
Bananas.
I believe it was 13 labs, maybe
Over 3 times.
at baseline, and then I think 2 more times in the first year, maybe 3 more times. But it was 1 less lab, and I think at least 1 less time over the first year for either a Roux-en-Y, which is when you actually bypass some of the stomach, or a gastric sleeve, which is when you take out the greater part of the stomach.
It's insane.
Yeah, and I gave this talk, which just basically summarized our paper, summarized the position, summarized what Laura already said, which is the why do we recommend low carbohydrate diets in especially type 1 diabetes? Because exactly what you said, Deichmann. It's very interesting how engineers are the people who are solving these problems in medicine to me. But as soon as I saw what Deichmann said, and Bernstein's example, where basically the net is to aim small, miss small. If you eat a small amount of carbohydrates, you do not need to dose yourself with 20 units of insulin. You dose yourself with 2 units of insulin. And your risk of going hypoglycemia is actually much lower when you do that. The reason I feel like, or the reason I know medicine at large recommends high carbohydrate diets for type 1 diabetes is because we are deathly afraid of hypoglycemia. And we believe, we being medicine at large, that if you increase carbohydrates, then that's how you actually treat hypoglycemia. If you go hypoglycemic, if your blood sugar is low, you're supposed to take a sugar pill, right? So you're going to eat more carbs, which is theoretically going to decrease your risk of hypoglycemia. Unfortunately, this is based on no data, and it's actually the opposite. The higher the carbohydrates you eat, the higher the insulin you dose yourself with, and the higher the risk of your hypoglycemia.
Yeah, and then the type 1 grit paper, so that's Lener's primary author. It was looking at over 300 people who were following Dr. Bernstein's methods of eating less than, it was about 36 grams, so less than 40 grams of carbohydrate per day with type 1 diabetes. Their rate of severe hypoglycemia and diabetic ketoacidosis was about 2% annually. And compare that to the type 1 diabetes exchange clinic registry, which is a huge registry of people with type 1 diabetes, over 13,000 people. And their rate was around 10% and 8% for DKA and severe hypoglycemia. So a 4 to 5 times higher likelihood.
With the standard of care carbohydrate diets. That is the lab work. And I think we can all agree that you do not need to trend 14 labs over for 5 times over the first year for a well-formulated ketogenic diet.
And just one other thing I'd like to add to that. Imagine if you were going to the doctor's office and the doctor said for your child, hey, I would like you to try this diet, but because of the concerns about nutritional deficiencies, we're going to have to check your kid's blood 5 times this year. Are you going to
back to cereal? I'm going back to cereal.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you don't have to check my blood sugar with the standard American or my blood work with the standard American diet. Why would I change my diet then? Yeah.
That is absurd. I'll never forget. It was 2003. Somebody sent it to me. It's a mainstream podcast, maybe The Daily or something, where the host is interviewing somebody around this issue, and they're identifying the problem, like obesity is on the rise, has been so since the 1980s. We don't know what to do. We went into school systems and told school systems to do the best thing, exercise and eat healthy food, and it didn't work. And so what we recommend is any child over 2 that's overweight, we recommend counseling for the child and the parents and the family. And at 12, they can start taking Ozempic, and at 13, they can start with a bariatric surgery. And the host is even like, wow, bariatric surgery, that sounds like kind of a big deal. Is that like a reversible thing, or is that like kind of permanent? And she's like, yeah, it's permanent, but obesity is such a big deal. And, we really, strongly recommend these steps. And I just wanted to like throw my phone across the freeway. Like, it's the most absurd thing.
Exactly. And there are kids out there that are truly very metabolically unwell, and everything we do in medicine has a risk and benefit. And it's just striking to me that I don't even want to talk about even the benefits at the moment, but if you isolate the risks of bariatric surgery versus a well-formulated ketogenic diet, I think anybody could just have the common sense to say you don't need more lab work for a dietary pattern change like that. The other big issue they brought up was disordered eating. And that was a fun one to read through. They had essentially 3 citations for this. And if you go through the citations, they never actually mentioned low carbohydrate diets per se causing disordered eating. There's actually 0 evidence. Multiple different professional organizations say that there is 0 evidence that any clinician-led nutrition intervention causes disordered eating. We have this data for we have this data for many different eating patterns in kids, because it's the first line for metabolic disease. And there has been no evidence that talking to kids at all about what they eat in terms of trying to improve their health causes this eating. And yet, when we go to talk about the ketogenic diet, they basically cite these theoretical risks, which exist for any dietary pattern. It exists for veganism. It exists for Mediterranean diets. Any diet pattern that is off of whatever a kid is eating, and if they're eating the standard American diet, that's literally everything, would place that child at risk for disordered eating. No data to back it up. These are theoretical risks. And so you have I think at the end of the day, the reason this is so frustrating is this. You have families and children that have durable, quantifiable, major benefits from reducing the carbohydrates in their diet. And they go to their physician who they want to support them. And even though their A1C is completely normal and they're not having complications and their growth is perfect and their growth's perfect, their A1C is optimal, and they're not having any complications or hypoglycemia or DKA with type 1 diabetes, they are immediately told based on these guidelines to stop eating this way. And to increase, so what Laura said, 45 to 65% of kcals per day from carbs. If you do the math for a 16-year-old who is active, I did the math for my talk. This is about 400 grams of carbohydrates a day. So going from a eating pattern that is working for the child in the family and telling the family, no, you have to stop this and eat 400 grams of carbohydrates is wrong. And I offer my time. I would love to talk to the AAP. Like, I want to extend olive branches. These are call to actions where we need to work together to come up with better plans for the health of the children in our country. Because obviously this isn't working. If you're telling a kid that has improvements in their metabolic health to stop eating a low carb diet, then you are actively endorsing the current standard of care, and you are actively endorsing the current standard of care outcomes, which is 14 years less life expectancy.
Oh my goodness. So I'm sitting here laughing, and it's not funny. Like, it's like you said, like, these are families, these are individual lives being affected for utter nonsense. It's not funny. It's just, you laugh because it's just so stunning. You can't even believe it. I expected it. I still can't believe it. So okay. So your commentary, the paper that you released, what has been the response to that? Obviously, they didn't publish the comments. Shocker. But have they reached out? Have they done anything? Have they responded? Have they wanted to chat? Anything?
No. And crickets. I get crickets. I gave the talk at SMHP. We've tried to get through to them on Twitter, multiple social media posts. Nothing inflammatory. In fact, again, extending the olive branch. You read through the nutrition committee, which is about 6 MDs who made this paper, and none of them have any background at all in ketogenic diets, period. They don't even have a psychiatrist or a neurologist who use ketogenic diets for children. And so they don't really I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and just say that maybe they're just unaware. And if we could create version 2 that just saying, hey, this is actually what the ketogenic diet is. This is how we use it in adults. Laura and I are family medicine. We have taken care of pregnant women. We have birth babies. We have taken care of infants, toddlers, adolescents, young adults, and people older than adults, older adults. And we have seen and treated metabolic diseases in all of these age groups. And yet the AAP is the only one that has these profound recommendations to check all these lab works in children. And as soon as a child turns 18 years old in 1 minute, then they no longer have to get the 5 lab draws and 14 labs every year. It doesn't make sense.
It's completely illogical. Yeah, it would have been much better if they would have left the diet alone. Don't mention anything about whatever diet. At least some, people could find out about this through the underground, the way that R.D. Dykman and so many other people have. Yeah, that's astoundingly insane. Okay, let's have some good talk here. Let's talk about the TORD study that just finished. What an amazing piece of work you guys did. So can you tell us a little bit about the nexus of this kind of study that you did, how it came up, why you decided you wanted to do it, what things you were seeking to do, and how the study was designed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been working with several different employers, so large companies, taking care of their employees to improve their metabolic health. And so it's been an amazing opportunity to have these companies let us work for them. And then also the fact that these companies are so interested in their employees' well-being that they're paying for us to take care of their employees. So that, first off, I got to thank the companies for advocating and caring about the health of their employees and doing something about it. And so it's truly just how we've been practicing medicine, and we keep all the data for the individuals that we're working with. And so at 1 year, we had data on 50 people that they've completed 1 year in the program with us. And we're thrilled to share the results with everybody. And the intervention, I'll say, I guess we're doing, for those who don't know. So we are a telemedicine-based company. Dr. Tro does see some patients in person who live up in New York, but we used, and what TORD stands for is text-based communications and messaging. So we are available basically 24/7 to our patients to try to help them whenever they are in need of help. Basically, if they're going to a restaurant, they're not sure what to order to help stay low carb, or their blood pressure is dropping, maybe because, again, they're now eating low carb and blood pressure gets a whole lot better. So we're available anytime. O is for online interactions. We've got an app that is full of courses and information for people on all things metabolic health, weight loss, food relationship, and then wellness coaching. We have some amazing health coaches that are part of our team and instrumental to really the success of our patients. Asynchronous education and community support, again, going back to the app, letting people go through the app, and then also having a community chat so people can support each other, ask questions. R is real-time biofeedback and remote monitoring. So we're tracking people's blood pressure, weight, and continuous glucose monitoring for at least the first month of the program, and then kind of depend on their blood sugars if they would like to continue using the CGM, or if they feel like they've got a solid standing without one. And then the dietary modification is TCR, or therapeutic carbohydrate reduction, and we typically recommend less than 30 grams of total carbohydrate per day, not worrying about counting the non-starchy vegetables like broccoli or cauliflower and salad greens. And then intermittent fasting. And when it comes to intermittent fasting, everybody's got their own routine that kind of works for them. That's something we work a little bit later on. So some people, end up eating 2 meals a day. Some people might eat 1 meal plus a snack. Some people are going to intermittently do a little bit longer fasting, 36, 48 hours. So a lot of variation, just person to person, where they're at in their journey.
Wow.
And so that's the intervention.
So it is quite involved. Obviously, there's multiple things that you were doing. How did you find the coaching aspect? Like, were you part of the coaching team coaching these people, or was it more the coaching team? And how labor intensive, I guess, was that?
Yeah, so we are, I definitely would consider myself kind of a part of the coaching team, but the health coaches themselves, they even way more so probably than I do on, say, a daily or a weekly basis, are texting back and forth with the patients to help them. And how it initially starts. So they see the health coach, then they'll follow up, see myself with the health coach for a long initial visit. And then at that point, there's weekly visits initially, we'll space out to every other week, and then monthly visits after month 4.
Okay, that's
And
exactly what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no. Well, so they'll see the coaches more often. So they might have 2 visits in a row with the coaches, and then the next one would be myself.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it sounds very much like the coaching that I do with my nutrition coaching clients, where like initially, yes, you need a lot of help, and I'm giving out my cell phone and text me and message me, and like it's a lot of work for the first few weeks.
Yeah.
And then after a while, you just stop hearing from these people and you're like, hey, you still out there? You still doing good? And people are like, yeah, I got it. I've kind of figured it out, especially with the CGM for at least a month. That will teach you so much, just that one tool alone.
100%. And what's awesome, this not related to the paper, but just kind of excites me as well, is I actually had a new patient, also one from the employee wellness program, and he had lost 50 pounds before his initial visit because he had downloaded the app and was using the app.
That's
And
awesome.
like, this is amazing. So he's coming to see me, and basically he's done my job, and I'm just encouraging him, keep going, you're doing awesome. Maybe we tweak things here and there.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and I did see the slide that showed the selection process. So I believe the company had something like, what was it, 2,000 employees or 1,000 employees, and 200 were interested in being enrolled in the study. And how did you end up choosing the 50 that participated?
Yeah, so everyone had their medical history, their medications that they were currently taking, weight history, food relationship, kind of these were in different questionnaires basically. And so we tried to select people who had the most kind of medical need. So looking at who was on the most medications, especially if they're on medications like insulin or sulfonylurea. So these are diabetes medications that contribute to weight gain and actually increase future risk for heart disease. And so yeah, basically the more medical conditions, the more they needed help and really to improve their metabolic health. That's who we were selecting first.
Got it. Okay. And then I did see that a few people dropped out, although I have to say it was for lots of different reasons, and it was a vast minority. So fair to maybe bring it up to say that some people did drop out, but again, multiple reasons and very few people.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something even, going forward too, it's really variable from cohort to cohort how many people drop out. So out of the 50, we had 9, 3 people no longer worked for the company. 5 people, just said, I'm taking a step back. They didn't give us a reason. And then 1 person said there's a family emergency basically and dropped out for that reason. So yeah, I think, and generally for a nutritional study intervention, that's a great dropout rate.
Yeah, that is really good. It would be fun to go follow up with the 3 people that are no longer with the company, just to say like, maybe they're still on it and still killing it, or whatever company they're at now.
One of them actually did text us 3 months after dropping out, and he did give us a wonderful update that he and his wife are still crushing it. So
oh, that's awesome. That's really encouraging.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. Well, if there's anything else we need to talk about as far as the setup to the results, we can mention that. If not, we can go right to the results and hear about what you guys found.
Yeah, no, I think we can jump into the results. Just, I guess, real quickly, people may, be aware of this at this point, but I just like to kind of put it in perspective why metabolic health is just so critical, and we really need to be finding new interventions to basically turn the tides. So currently 38% of adults have either prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, and 42% of adults now have obesity. So the cost of type 2 diabetes on the medical system per year is over $400 billion. And the cost of obesity and just direct costs is over $170 billion per year. And so
big problem.
Big problem. And, we'll talk a little bit about the GLP-1 medications. These are things like semaglutide, Ozempic, tirzepatide, Mounjaro, Wegovy, the different names for it. And these are very effective medications. But if everybody who qualified for one of these medications was put on one of these medicines, that would be costing close to $1.9 trillion per year.
Oh my
So that is not an effective or cost. It is not realistic. That's not a solution to our health crisis that we're having.
Wow, I should have invested in Novo Nordisk.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, I remember the day looking at the stock price after one of their papers came out. I'm just wild.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
So
thank you for pointing that out. And there were some people on those medications that were included in this trial, I would assume.
yes, yep. So we had there was about, oh gosh, I'm gonna draw a blank on the exact number. I believe it's about 8 patients who were taking these medications, and most of them were actually, I can pull it up pretty quickly actually. They were taking these medications prior to the start of the trial. Once they joined, we did actually taper 4 individuals off of these medications.
Great.
And those 4 individuals that we tapered off, they continued to have weight loss or did not regain more than a few percentage points of body weight, which is great. And we have many, like several month data following stopping these medications, because when you look at the trials that use these medicines, when people stop them, they have a huge weight regain, very close to baseline. And so the fact that people were able to taper off and stop these medications and continue or maintain their weight loss is great, and just points again to, I think, the dietary intervention. In large
Amazing. Yeah, that's a big thing that everybody talks about. These are lifetime medications. Once you're on it, you'll never get off it, or you will regain all the weight. So that's very, very encouraging to hear.
Yeah. And so actually, let's see, I didn't misquote that, the amount. So it was 4 from the start. And then we did start 2 people on these medications ourselves. And one of them was doing really good with the dietary changes, but was having still having really invasive food thoughts that was interfering with daily life. And once we started it, it made a huge difference. And so,
wow.
You know, I am not opposed to using these medications. I have a few people, not a lot, but I do have a few people on them. And again, they can be very effective. I think you just want to use them selectively.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And just like we were talking about earlier with the insulin and the smaller numbers, if you're using a dietary intervention, I'm assuming you can make a much lower prescription of these medications and thus have way less side effects. That must be something that they reported.
Yeah, yep, that too. I have one other person who has a condition called lipedema, and they can have like very painful fat areas on their body. Like they can get nodules, and the individual is actually able to take a dose once every 2 weeks, and doing that greatly improves her lipedema symptoms.
Wow,
and so amazing. I am happy to have a way to help her improve her pain. It's something she deals with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And again, she's just taking it basically every other week, and it works.
Great.
And
That's
she's
really encouraging.
Lifestyle changes too. And she, just to point out, even prior, going onto a ketogenic diet significantly improved the symptoms as well. So it's
all the time.
Both of those things have just really had a huge impact. And interestingly, the higher the level of ketone, noticed further benefit from the pain and inflammation from the lipedema.
Wow. Yeah, you hear about that all the time. And what must be the most frustrating and awful condition ever? Lipedema sounds just absolutely terrible to try to manage.
Yeah, it can be really, really tough, and really hard for the patients, for sure.
Yeah.
The one other individual we did start one on was someone who has had type 2 diabetes for a long time and has had amputations as complications from the diabetes. And so again, someone who is very high risk and is working on the lifestyle changes, but again, this medication with their level is helpful. It is. And so yeah, again, I think selecting the right person, and what worries me a lot about these medicines is in part the clinics that are online, and people can just get these medications without a lot of extra lifestyle education or support on them, and then insurance stops covering them, and then they haven't changed their lifestyle at all, and that's when you see again the weight rebound, and it just can be really hard for people.
I've also heard on that note that like some of the online clinics, like sourcing the drugs can be really sketchy and dicey, and where they're getting them from and how pure they are is really tricky. I've heard some horror stories there as well. Yeah,
definitely true. So while we're, continue talking about the GLP-1s. So on the results, we had at 1 year, 15.5% total body weight loss. And when you compare that to semaglutide or Wegovy in the step 1 and step 2 trials, the major trials, they had a 14.9% weight loss. So yeah, so that was super exciting to see that we beat out Wegovy. And the other aspect that is actually, I think, very relevant is losing more than 5% of your total body weight is considered clinically significant. You start to see improvements in blood pressure, lab values, overall health. And so we had over 90%, 92% of people who lost more than 5% of their body weight. When you look at the step 1 and step 2 trials, they had 68% and 86%.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so that was, again, I think just shows the power of lifestyle changes. And the right lifestyle change is not, telling someone to eat less and move more.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah. What were some of the other final results you guys calculated?
Yeah. So based on medication deprescription, which stopping medications is one of my probably favorite things to do besides celebrating the different victories patients tell me about. We stopped 96 medications in these 50 people. And that cost savings for the company turned into $83,000 per year, or about $1,700 per person.
Incredible. Wow. That's amazing. And actually, on that note, I do want to point this out. I heard Tro talking about this recently. Like, you guys are working with other companies, and that's the hook, right? That's the pitch that you're trying to pitch to some of these higher ups in these companies, is we're going to save you tons of money. But Tro himself has been really surprised that a lot of the motivation of these CEOs and people making decisions actually has nothing to do with money. It's more the health of their employees, and they really care more about the health. And they're like, yeah, we'll pay whatever costs is fine, but like we want to improve the lives of our employees. I thought that was really encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. It really is. These the C-suite individuals of these companies, they are passionate about metabolic health. They care about their employees, and they realize that eating low carb, changing your lifestyle is going to make you a happier person, a healthier person, and then also that makes you a better employee, and hopefully you'll stay with the company. It's a great, I think it's a great model.
Wow.
I think it's the way it has to be done. The incentives in the traditional clinic model do not, and I'm in the traditional clinic model, they don't align to spending the time with patients and getting them off of medicines and following up, making sure they're staying on the eating pattern, or troubleshooting whatever you need to troubleshoot with patients to keep them on a low carb ketogenic diet and help them. Whereas as Laura was saying, the companies want to keep their employees healthy and happy. In the traditional clinic model, it's really insurance based, and there's a large impulse really to prescribe and manage, but not really truly get to the underlying treatment of what's going on.
Yeah, good point. Wow, that's amazing. Were there any other data points that you were looking at in this study, or was that it?
Yeah, actually, 2 other things I'll quickly add to, and just to clarify. So 15.5% total body weight loss equated to an average of 43 pounds per person at 1 year. And then other things that we did not talk about in this paper, but we're working on publishing for future papers, that I think is pretty exciting, what we're seeing is improvement in binge eating, food addiction symptoms, and then significant improvements in A1C, lipids, triglycerides plummeting, blood pressure improvements. So I'm excited that, and hopefully the next, several months here coming up, we'll have some other papers published with that data.
That is so amazing. Wow. Wonderful results. And I want to say also that, like, you have objective things, obviously, that you measure and you report on, and the cost savings, the weight loss and everything. But you also have to think, like, the people in the weight loss drug trials were probably dealing with significant side effects, where the people on your trial probably had incredible side effects and other things that were positive. Both were subjective and probably not something you can like really study as much, but the anecdote must have been completely different on your side versus what it would have been on the drug side of things.
Yeah, 100%. I'll just share several of the stories that I loved hearing from my patients. So one of them, wedding ring that couldn't fit for years could now fit again. Someone else who had not been able to ride a bike for a long time, now riding a bike for miles. Going to Disney World, it can be a ton of fun, but you have to walk a lot. And so one of the individuals said they were able to go to Disney World and not just sit on the park bench. They actually were able to walk around the whole day and enjoy the time with their family instead of, saying, I'll catch up with you later.
Wow. That's amazing.
There's just, several people who were really excited and they didn't have to ask for a seatbelt extender on when flying again.
Wow.
And,
incredible.
It's these types of like real life, these are people who just their quality of life is so much better.
Yep.
And I'd encourage people because it's very empowering but basically we have interviewed some of the people in these programs that on the Low Carb MD podcast to hear their stories and their change in their life. And it's just incredible to hear their stories. And so it's very motivating.
Yeah, I loved those episodes, by the way. They were really, really well done and very insightful. I love that. You also have to think, like, what is the ripple effect, right? Like, if you're working with one employee, well, that employee has a family and kids and a spouse and friends and neighbors. And you just wonder if those ripple effects also helped many more lives out there.
Yeah, so we can't really collect data on it, but both Tro and myself, and you talk to any of the health coaches, we have numerous family members that have adopted low carb and lost over 50 pounds or over 20 pounds while their family member who's in the program. Someone who said, they had talked to all their cousins about it, and now they had several cousins adopting it. And the individual I mentioned earlier who just downloaded the app and has lost 50 pounds prior to starting the program. And so, thankfully, it really is, people see the results, and then it's not only a weight loss results, but they see how much more energy and how much more positive, and their mood is improved. And that is just, you can feel that, you see that in a person's face when you're talking to them.
Wow. It's conversations like this that just help me really appreciate the contrast of everything we were talking about in the beginning of this conversation, and the way the American Diabetes Association is making recommendations that make no sense, and kids are remaining very sick, and the problems are getting worse, and they're ignoring people like Matt. And you see this whole other side where it's like you guys are like hitting, home runs. Like, everybody is getting better, and the numbers are incredible, and it's just so interesting to see the contrast and like the darkness on the one side versus like the light of the other side. It's amazing to reflect on.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's so exciting, and I love practicing medicine. I'm so grateful that I get to practice medicine the way I do, because when I go to work, I just get to, for the most time, people do struggle, obviously, and you got to help them and try to navigate and figure out how to navigate, social situations that can be really hard. But for the most part, people are just doing so well and they feel so good, and getting to experience that and do that on a daily basis. And again, take people off of medications is so rewarding.
That's amazing. I'm guessing that if I were to interview 100 random doctors out there, probably 99 of them would not have had the same response that you just said, that you are so excited to go to work and help people. And just reflecting back on the first conversation that you and I had about your career journey and how you decided to get into this, if that hadn't happened, imagine your career being so much different now and being trapped in a model that you're stuck in and can't get out of. It would have been completely different.
It's crazy. I think about during residency, I would have 15-minute appointment slots, and now my initial appointment is an hour and a half, and we don't always need an hour and a half, but a lot of the time we do. And then follow-ups are at least 30 minutes, if not an hour, so you have time to really get to the root and then really figure out how you can help that person in front of you.
That's amazing. Wow, that's so cool. I love that. And if you wouldn't mind, could you comment a little bit more about the what you mentioned briefly about talking about binge eating disorder and some of the things you will be reporting on in the future?
Yeah, so actually at the Symposium of Metabolic Health this year, we made a poster on some of our preliminary data on food addiction symptoms and binge eating symptoms, and over 80% of people had significant improvements in their food addiction symptoms. And same thing, I think for the binge eating symptoms, over 83% of people improved. And the where there's not there, again, this semaglutide, these GLP-1 medications, they can help for sure with binge eating symptoms. Not, as much data there on the food addiction aspect, but the same intervention that is causing all of these other health benefits is also improving the binge eating symptoms, improving the food addiction symptoms. And hopefully we're going to, start doing a little bit more research even into other mental health conditions as well. And I mean, the data is already coming out, but just hopefully we can expand on it as well from an anxiety and depression standpoint.
Interesting.
So yeah, we are definitely looking to, try to get a little bit more research there, because we see it, even though we're not necessarily collecting a lot of data on it, people's mood always improves. I mean, it's just, you don't see someone who does not say they are mentally in a better spot.
Totally. Yeah, totally. You just really don't ever see that. And yeah, you mentioned food addiction. I've heard more positive things also about other forms of addiction, including alcohol addiction improving. So that will be very interesting to see if you observe that as well.
Yeah, I have seen that. I don't have a huge population where consuming too much alcohol is an issue, but probably 5 patients who definitely, I would say, it'd be, good to cut back on alcohol, and they did it with hardly any intervention per se, except eating low carb.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, that's awesome. Wow. Is there anything else you guys have coming down the pipeline? I asked you that last time, and you guys mentioned a bunch of stuff which you both accomplished all of last year and then some. So I'm sure you're going to remain very busy.
Yeah. So, and I'll let Matt talk a little bit about this, but we are, so we're working on the food addiction and binge eating paper currently. We're going to be working on the paper on all of the improvements in biomarkers, lipids, A1C, liver enzymes, etc. And then from the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, exciting that we are working towards being involved with the the National Nursing Associations, as well as the dietitians. And Matt, he's the head of the advocacy committee, so he is also going to be talking at or working with Ballerstead.
Yeah. So the question is always, what can we do to continue the advocacy for ketogenic diets, to continue to promote them for the greater medical community? And I think getting as many allied health professionals credits for the activities through the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. So we're trying to get the AMA Category 1 credits for physicians. That would go pretty easily into the continuing nursing education for nurses, and then also get credits for pharmacists, registered dietitians, nutritionists, etc. That would be goal number 1 of mine for this year. Kind of behind the scenes work, but definitely is, I think, the best bang for the buck. And then also working with people across many different disciplines. I currently am in talks with Peter Ballerstead, who, if you haven't listened to his talks at all, I would definitely recommend it. He's a ruminant agriculturalist, and he gives the most amazing talks on just that area in general, which is very closely linked with ketogenic diets, obviously animal-based eating patterns. And we're trying to bridge the world between the farmers who produce the food, the health food, the ruminant agriculturalists, and letting them know, hey, yeah, you guys do make health food, and this is how we make America healthy.
Wow, I absolutely love that. Well, to your, I hope you appreciate this, but I just interviewed him for the 3rd time this week. And so his episode will drop just a few days before this one will. And we talk a lot about that, about bridging those gaps, and him going to his communities and telling people, like, look, you think you're making unhealthy food and killing people. It's actually the very best thing you can be doing and getting out there. So those bridges are so important, and that bridge needs to be built from both sides. So that's really cool work. Matt, I just have to ask you, like, you're in a more traditional kind of clinic. Is that part of the advantage of you knowing what you know, but staying in a more traditional kind of way of helping people? Like, are you able to infiltrate the system a little bit better by kind of staying in that type of a model?
Yeah, so I think Laura and I have like the best of all worlds between us. Like, the stuff she does with Tro, I actually tell my patients, like, yeah, my wife does the same thing. She does telehealth from home, licensed in, her and her colleague are licensed in 50 states, and they give ICU level care. And there are people that need ICU level care. If I could wave my magic wand, everybody that has a moderate to severe food addiction really needs that close follow-up. what I offer is the traditional model, 40-minute initials, 20-minute follow-ups, and doing low carbohydrate ketogenic lifestyle changes, and following up generally monthly. But I do follow up much more closely if people are on insulin. And I have gotten such amazing feedback from other people in the clinic system. So I work in a semi-private clinic, but it's affiliated with a larger healthcare system, and also Wake Forest, which is the local university. And what essentially I've asked the other primary care doctors, I'm like, look, if you have a patient that wants to get off medicine, and if they like animal-based diets, just send them my way. Because if nothing else, that first visit is going to be at least educational for them. They can at least know that you don't have to be on metformin forever. When I tell patients, when they first come to me from the standard model, yeah, you can not take metformin. Yeah, you don't need this medicine for the rest of your life. And they lose it. I also tell them I eat 6 eggs for breakfast every morning, and they look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, that's what you got to do to get off metformin. And they love it, because especially in this area of North Carolina that we're in, one of my clinics is literally in a town called Rural Hall. And the town just north of that is Tobaccoville. And if you tell these patients, like, they're smart, they get it. You tell them you can eat meat, it's healthy. You can eat eggs, they're healthy. Don't worry about what you've heard in the media. I'm your physician, I'm your doctor now. This is what I'm telling you to do. And they come back. So I actually completed last week my first clinic audit. Yeah, I went through, and this is what every physician should do. This is what Tro says time and time again, and I'm a big fan of. Every physician needs feedback on how they're doing. So I looked at my metabolic health clinic. I get these internal referrals, but anybody can really see me for ketogenic diets. But I get internal referrals mainly from other primary care physicians that ask the questions of that to their patients, and they'll send them to me. Sorry. And I'll see them. I have had 68 patients see me for greater than one follow-up, and I've deprescribed 31 medications, and 5% of people have put their diabetes into remission. And that's only over the first year. That's not, people have not been seeing me for a full year. That's really, the average follow-up at this point is probably only 3 visits. So it's very exciting, very awesome data, and it feels good to be able to do this in that traditional model, because I accept insurance, and patients pay no copay or $10. I am billed as a family medicine physician, which is extremely affordable, and I help the patients if they want to go on an animal-based diet to get off medicines and improve their metabolic health.
That's amazing. I just have so thoroughly enjoyed catching up with the three of you. If you are listening and not watching, James has been quite active and a little bit more talkative this time than last time, but I think everybody will excuse a few coos. He looks like such a strong and active kiddo. That's amazing.
Yeah, I gotta just plug in. So he's I don't know, a little over 20 pounds at this point. But at that, he picked up a 20-pound weight, not high off the ground, but he picked it up.
Yes.
So I was like, he's picking up his body weight already.
That's amazing. Yeah, not only is he on the fast track to becoming an MD sometime very soon, but he's also lifting weights and throwing them around. That's pretty exciting. That's awesome. Well, like I said, it's been so exciting to chat with you guys. I know what an uphill battle this is, and how it sometimes feels like a lot of work and a long way to go. And again, we just these associations just keep doubling down on really terrible advice. But it's people like you guys that make me feel really optimistic about the future, and you're changing lives out there. And it's never as much as we want to, but it's a lot, and it's improving a lot of individual lives. So I just so much appreciate both of you. Tell people where they can go to find you and connect with you in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to tord.health that's our medical practice. So again, we're licensed basically in all 50 states. I think Alaska and Hawaii we've not gotten licensed in. And then you can find me on Twitter at Laura Buchanan MD. Same with Instagram. Although I'll be honest, I post way less now that James is around than I used to.
And I'm on X, Twitter, Matt Calkins, Calkins, MD. Send me a message or just tweet at me. Happy to hear from you.
Awesome. That's great. We'll link all of that up in the show notes. Last question for you, Matt. Are you winning any tennis games these days against Laura?
No, although I would say my tennis game has elevated. Laura's has elevated hers just as much, and still frustratingly, I'm not getting bageled, so I am taking some games.
Okay.
But overall, it is still depressingly low win
Got
percentage.
it. Like we're
Yeah.
very sorry to hear that. You had your chance while she was pregnant. Like that was your time to shine and take a lesson or two or whatever, like make a jump. But yeah, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, maybe pregnancy number 2 or 3
There
or
you go.
whichever one. I don't know.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, you guys are the best. Thank you again so very much for all your amazing work. It's really appreciated by myself and everybody out there. And yeah, you're just such a beacon of light and of of hope for people out there who are really suffering. So thank you again for taking time out of your very busy day. I know you had to do some babysitting during the episode. You guys did great. But yeah, thank you so very much for taking time out of your day to appear back on our show again. We really appreciate you both.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure catching up.
Thank you, Casey. Appreciate you.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate you as well. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.